From Fox 8 Sports, this is the Overtime Podcast.
From the Fox 8 studios here in New Orleans, this is the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. I am your host, Sean Fazende. Riding shotgun next to me as he does each and every episode is Andre Johnson.
Junior.
Do not forget the Junior. It is very, very, very important. Before we get into today's content, be sure to like, share, rate, and review. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Get the bell notification for when we drop that fire content. And today, we have another one. Today, another great episode on this Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. Before we get into that, how you feeling on this Thursday, Andre?
Feeling good. You see, I'm dressed out a little
Saw
bit
that.
today.
Yeah, you kind of dripped out today. I'm kind of casual. You kind of outperform me today.
I know. Typically, you outdress me because I just be chilling, producing. But I had an interview with the NOLA Gold head coach today, so I had to step out on him a little bit today.
Okay, I like it. Shout out to the NOLA Gold. So, yeah, anyway, today it is Thursday as we get closer and closer into the weekend. Wanted to get into our big picture topic as we stick with the theme of Saints OTAs. And this was something that was brought up in Wednesday's extremely long press conference with Dennis Allen. It just kind of kept going and going and going and going. But at one point in the press conference, there was a question that was posed about the addition of Klint Kubiak's potential impact, trying to compare that with the impact of Gregg Williams back in 2009.
Right. Obviously, Gregg Williams coming in 2009 and helping lead that Saints defense to what wound up being a historic season for the entire franchise. And we're actually going to play that soundbite that Sean just mentioned. We're going to let you guys listen to it right now.
There's a lot of different ways to skin a cat, right? And it's not necessary the as you said it, pomp and circumstance, all the yelling and screaming. That's not necessarily what changed the culture. Okay, it was the attention to detail. It was this is who we are, this is what we are, and this is how we're going to play. And then it was holding the guys accountable to that standard. That was the difference. Now, how you do that? You know, Gregg Williams was, hell of a defensive coach. Tony Dungy was a great defensive coach and a head coach. I'd say they probably did it two different ways, but both effective. But the accountability factor is the key.
So listening to that, I'll pose the question to you now. Can Klint Kubiak's arrival in New Orleans have the same impact on the Saints offense as Gregg Williams did back in the day on the Saints defense?
All right, this really piqued my interest when I went back and re-listened to the Dennis Allen press conference because I was involved in some of it, then I kind of backed off because it had stretched a little bit so we had to do some other things. But I really hadn't thought of this comparison before, and I was surprised I hadn't because, I've been covering this team for so long. Generally, similarities or comparisons come up that makes sense, and I felt like it was worthy of a discussion on this podcast here today. What's really wild, though, just first to starting things off, is just how few of us left covering the Saints were actually here when Gregg Williams was here, when he arrived here early in, 2009 and really shocked the system. I think there was only like 5 or 6 of us left that were here when Gregg Williams was here that had a chance to cover him and see things kind of up close and personal back in 2009. And my goodness, what a change it was.
9th grade at the time.
Yeah, so it was a long time. And like just kind of the way it goes in football. But look, first things first, let's get this out of the way. In terms of personality, could not be more of a difference between Gregg Williams and Klint Kubiak, not even on the same planet. Williams was loud, brash, arrogant at times. Kubiak is not loud at all. Seems like more of a scheme guy, more of a detail guy. Not that Gregg wasn't a detail guy, but the way they speak and verbalize things on the football field could not be different, any more different. It's a striking difference in personality. The question is one of impact and how they go about making that impact, because that's ultimately what is important. Williams' impact, frankly, was less about scheme. It was so much more about shocking the culture and just how much that side of the ball at that time really desperately needed it. Just a relentless, let me repeat that, a relentless infusion of the ultra alpha aggressive energy to the highest degree. I don't want to overstate it. I don't want to exaggerate it, but that's just how it was back in 2009. Very first practice, I remember going out there. We all walk out there. We've done this before, you know. We go out there to this practice, and all we hear is ball, 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 ball. Just yelling from Gregg Williams, and we all look around like, who is this guy? What is going on here? Just so intense. No microphone, just yelling, yelling, yelling. Now, understand, that 09 team was a team full of big personalities and, frankly, a lot of alphas on that team. You had Drew Brees. You had Jeremy Schott. You had Reggie Bush. Sean Payton, I mean, was an alpha. I mean, and Williams, amongst all those guys, stood out. That defense hadn't really, at that time, they'd really played second fiddle to Drew and company on the offensive side of the ball at that time, and really just didn't have quite the edge that they needed. Then all of a sudden, Williams comes in with this bravado and this brash nature and this high volume, high intensity, just presence, and he is terrorizing the Saints offense at practice. There were so many fights that broke out because after every play, Williams is demanding the player strip the ball, strip the ball, strip the ball until it comes out on the ground, even when the play is well over. And any incomplete pass was treated as a fumble. That's why you heard ball, 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 ball. It's even hurt my voice trying to say it because it was so intense when he said it. It was such a shock, and it really was an intense atmosphere, and it gave the defense an edge and really the entire team an edge when you think about it. And then Williams, from a statistical standpoint or from a schematic standpoint, once the games actually started, once that culture was shocked, once that edge had really been formed, could not care any less about stats or run defense or pass defense or total defense. They ranked in like the 20s, like mid to late 20s in all those categories. He cared about one thing and one thing only. He cared about creating turnovers. That was the one thing they practiced all the time. It was the one stat. It was the only stat they cared about, and it was the perfect match for an offense that had really reached their peak. That was, I mean, they were rolling at that time with Drew and Colston and all those guys at that time. So he really infused that aspect, that edge from a mentality, culture, aggressiveness sort of standpoint, but also the one thing he really honed on from a statistical standpoint was you got to create those takeaways. Game 1 against Detroit back in 2009, 3 takeaways. Game 2 against Philly, 4 takeaways. Game 3 against Buffalo, 2 takeaways. Game 4 against the Jets, 4 takeaways. The Saints didn't trail at any point in any game till like week 6 of the season that year. It was just the perfect storm. He truly gave the Saints a whole new identity, really the whole team. And it really was something to watch, kind of just develop in front of us. And then 1-0, 2-0, 3-0, 4-0, got all the way to 13-0. I mean, this place was going crazy. I mean, this city was going crazy. The atmosphere, it was just unlike anything we had ever seen at that point. Which really brings us to Kubiak at this time. And the ultimate question is, can he have that type of impact? I think the shock to the system offensively is just, it's not the bravado, it's not the brashness, it's not the yelling and the screaming. It's really just the newness of the schematics, which have been so obvious. And just the 3 practices that we've been able to see. Kubiak's brought them to the drills. He's brought them to the formations. He's brought it to the motions. He's brought it to the personnel groupings. He's brought it to guys going in certain spots that they've never been. You realize just how stale things had gotten and just how predictable things had gotten when you just see just how different things look now offensively. Again, in 3 practices of OTAs without even pads.
Right.
Jake Hayner made the point last week, the Drew comparison to that offense, and it's so true that so much was added and tailored for Drew over, the 15 years that he was here. So when he left in 2020 into the 2021 season, they took that 15-year version and handed it to the next guy, and then the next guy, and then the next guy, and it just didn't work. Remember, things didn't get better until last year until they scaled things back, simplified things, and started to use less groupings, and they had to just scale it back. So probably for me, the biggest similarity at this stage between Kubiak and Gregg Williams, June OTAs and minicamp, is just how much the players are embracing the change, how much the players are excited about the change, how much they're welcoming the change, the new concepts, the different ways to approach offensive football, and really on both sides of the ball. Because like the offense had to work so hard when Williams arrived because they were so used to a certain way with the Saints defense. Now the defense is having to work that much harder that Kubiak has arrived because they were used to so many things a certain way. And with Drew gone, obviously, the offense hadn't been the exact same. So the ultimate test is simply this. We know it's going to come down to the fall. We can talk about, we can praise them all right now. We can do all this, do all that. But we know it's going to talk, it ultimately boils down to, yes, it's going to look different, but does that difference lead to a better offense, which leads to more wins? So can Kubiak have a Gregg Williams-style impact? I know the Saints certainly hope so. I would certainly love to see it. I do see some similarities just when you really look at it, take personality aside, and just in terms of kind of players' reception to the newness of everything. But the ultimate answer to that question isn't going to come to the fall.
Right, and I think he's got a good chance of being able to do it. And to say that Kubiak can have a Gregg Williams-type impact, you really have to put into context of what that impact was for Gregg Williams. It's important to note, it's not like the Saints went from a bottom-tier defense to a top-tier defense. Right. They were ranked 26th in total defense in 2008. In 2009, they were ranked 20th. So they only jumped up 6 spots.
Exactly.
But where Gregg Williams really made his impact was in one area, and that was taking the ball away.
That's it.
When you look at turnover differential, Saints were -4 in 2008. That means they had 4 less takeaways than, the neutral line. 2009, they were +11. +11. That went from 22nd in 2008 to 3rd in 2009. You affect one area, and you saw how it showed, and especially when it comes to turnovers, that's giving the ball to that super-powered offense, and you saw what impact that made and how it led to them winning a championship. Now you go back to Kubiak. Kubiak doesn't have to take the 14th ranked offense last year and bring them to number 1 per se.
No.
But if he can affect one area, and that one area being running the ball,
that's it.
I think he'll be in a really good spot to do so because running the ball is what's lagged behind for the Saints. I believe they were like 22nd last season. If he can take 22nd and bring it into the upper half, even into the top 10, and you've got Alvin Kamara, you've got Kendre Miller, you've got Jamal Williams. So if he can really infuse new life into that running game and affect one area, I think this offense will be pretty good because, there's been a lot of talk about Derek Carr and Pete Carmichael and the run game, everything from last year. Keep in mind, this is still the 14th ranked total offense from last year and the 9th scoring offense when it comes to putting points on the board from last season. So you can complain about a lot from last year's offense, and a lot of it would be valid, but keep in mind, it could be a lot worse. There's a team sitting in the 20s who are like, man, I wish we could have scored points like the Saints.
Right.
So, like I said, if Kubiak can really impact his one area, I think he can have that Gregg Williams
And
impact.
that would be disappointing if he didn't. Because at its core, I've said this many times, the wide zone scheme, the stretch boot scheme, it's a run-first offense. It's creative ways to run the football. And it would be a disappointment if there wasn't a significant jump in run offense, rushing offense for where they were a season ago, which was, man, I go back to just some of the running offense last year, the rushing attack. It just was so anemic at times.
Yep.
It was disappointing, thoroughly disappointing, because if you just had a little bit of a boost there, you probably would have had more. You'd have been better in the red zone for sure, which would have led to probably a couple of more victories. So if nothing else, I do think that, it should be a given. It's not going to be. It's not like nothing is a given in the NFL, but at its core, that's what those guys do more than anything else, is run the football with a variety of different backs. They've had star backs, they've had no-name backs, and now with the Saints, they'll have a star, they'll have a veteran, they'll have an up-and-coming guy, a young second-year pro. So we'll certainly see. But I do like the idea of when you pinpoint the one area. Gregg Williams, it was takeaways. You pinpoint the run offense or rushing attack in this system for Klint Kubiak, that can make all the difference in the world when it comes to wins and losses. I hope I made that point enough that we've now talked to probably over the last 3 weeks 8 or 9 offensive players in that, somewhere in that frame, maybe a little less, maybe about 7 or 8. I don't know. And look, I'm around these guys a lot. Locker rooms, talk to these guys, try to vibe it out, look at body language during practice. The connection is there. When you have the players like full attention and full sense of, whoa, what this could be, I think that goes a long way, as opposed to the players are just kind of going through the motions, a little bit stale, a little bit of, okay, you got a quarterback who's trying to catch up like Derek Carr was a season ago, a couple of guys that may or may not necessarily, they all respected Pete. And look, I talked to a couple of coaches after he was let go, and they would all tell me how much of a genius he was, and I have no doubt he was. But at some point, it just kind of runs its course, and you just does that drain the mental energy and the mental edge that you need to compete week in and week out in offensive football, especially when things go wrong, or especially when you need sort of a jolt of life or kind of an infusion of life with that side of the ball. Now with Kubiak, and not just Kubiak, that's a good point to point out too, because when Williams got here, it was just Williams. DA was on the staff with Gary Gibbs, and he stayed on the staff with Williams. It wasn't like they got rid of the entire defensive staff. It was just Williams. Now, offensively this year, it's the entire staff.
Yeah.
So I do think there's a healthy embrace on both sides. One, the coaching staff wanting to really impact, their job and their new team, and also the players that have been learned one way most of their career now get to switch to this offense that I do think brings a genuine level of excitement, and it's had past record of success. So I hope I'm selling that point enough, just how much I'm picking up on that from certain players on this team. We talked to Derek Carr, we talked to Taysom, we talked to Chris Olave, we've talked to a couple of offensive linemen. So it has really, Jamal Williams. So it has really been it's been something to really kind of, that I've certainly noticed, and I think that is a big part of why they can have success on offense this year.
Right, and it just seems fun for them.
Yeah.
And like at the core of what we're talking about, sports, it's a game. And it just seems like they're having a lot of fun when you listen to Derek Carr talk about just how excited he is to learn something new. Because like you mentioned, what they were kind of working with last year and the previous seasons is the leftovers of the Drew Brees offense, which worked great for Sean and Drew, but maybe it's not going to work as well for Dennis Allen or Pete Carmichael and Jameis Winston, Andy Dalton, Derek Carr. Now you've got Derek Carr who's learning a new system with his teammates instead of everybody having this prior knowledge and he's just trying to catch up. He's learning it with his guys. You're seeing Chris Olave talk about the playmakers that they have and kind of alluding to they really haven't gotten to show how good they can be after the catch, to where now they're being able to do so. To where Taysom has been doing one thing all OTAs. I don't know. That might be the longest stretch that I've seen Taysom do one thing since I've gotten here and started covering the Saints in the media. Like last season, I remember the buzz about Taysom was, oh, he's with the tight ends this day. Yeah. Oh, he was with the quarterbacks this day. Now he's over here. Taysom did one thing. Derek Carr learning with everybody else, everybody on one accord, doing something new and just a breath of fresh air that I think this team and this offense really needed, and they're having fun with it. And this is the time of year to have fun with it.
That's it. That's probably a good way to put it. It's just they seem to be enjoying this time in the calendar, the football calendar, where there just seems to be – they seem a little bit refreshed, which I think they needed it after the way last season ended and some of the friction that materialized and some of the guys that are in, some of the guys that are now out. I think that was certainly necessary. I want to point out this as well. It's the Gregg Williams factor back in 2009, and this wasn't just Williams because, like I said, the Saints' offense was so – I mean, my goodness, were they rolling? I mean, it's why I don't want to just completely just trash the previous offense because, I mean, I've seen it perfected, and it was a beautiful thing. We've all seen it. Y'all have seen it.
Right.
But Williams' impact was so instant. Like I read off the takeaways, 3 against Detroit. They won that game 45-10. Drew threw 6 touchdowns that day. 4 against Philly, 2 at Buffalo, 4 at the Jets. It was so immediate, that aspect of the defense. And at that time, the offense is just rolling. So it's this explosion. How instant will the impact be of the new system? Because every new system is going to go into the season with a certain vision and ultimately pretty quickly there's a sharp altering of that vision, or at least a part of that vision when it comes to offensive football that you have to figure out, and you got to survive sort of where you're at, and which because it's going to be different than what you're ultimately going to be when you're playing at your best. So I do think how soon the impact occurs is something I'll be watching for, and if that has the same level as Williams did back in 2009, because I think it's been shown if this team gets in an early season hole, it's just tough for them to dig themselves out of it. So at some point, hopefully soon, the impact is felt when the games count in the fall.
Right, and it's definitely worth mentioning. We talked to Drew Brees a few months ago when he opened that small slider spot up, and he mentioned he feels like this offense last season had the potential to be a top 10 offense. And he said coming into this season, he expects this offense to be a top 5, top 10 level offense. And again, it's worth mentioning, this was the 14th total offense.
Yeah.
Is climbing 4 spots unreasonable when you've got a new offensive coordinator in Klint Kubiak? And sure, you can say, oh, well, the reason they were that high, 14th in total offense, 9th in scoring offense, was because of that schedule they had last year. Well, this schedule they have now is ranked the second easiest in the league.
Right.
And they do have some heavy hitters on there. They've got Dallas that they're going to have to deal with. They've got the pass rushers in New York they'll have to deal with. But ultimately, the NFL is ranking this schedule relatively easy compared to some of the other teams in the league. And Drew Brees said this offense has the tools to be a top 5, top 10 level defense or offense, And with Klint Kubiak bringing in what he's bringing in, especially if he can get that run game going, I think Drew could be right.
I think so too. And I think that's kind of where I wanted to go. I was doing my best to really connect the dots between Kubiak and Williams in June, and then try to project what could ultimately happen. But I do think there's some seeds there of similarities, and you just hope that, because D.A. even said, he knew at this point back in 2009 they were going to be a good team. They know they were going to be a Super Bowl team, but knew they were going to be a good team, a really good football team. He didn't verbalize that about this current team in 2024, but I wonder if there's a feeling about that within the locker room, because back going into 2009 season, the Saints really, they weren't projected to do anything going into that season. They were coming off an 8-8 year back. I
think they were 4th in the NFC South in 2008.
2008. They missed the playoffs. So I just think ultimately it was a good topic to explore because of the comparison of a pretty significant coordinator change. We've seen coordinator changes all the time, but for him to bring up Gregg Williams, which is probably the most significant coordinator change that we've seen in the last 15, 20 years when talking about Klint Kubiak, I think was certainly worth exploring. And look, I only hope that can have that kind of impact, because I want to see this team win. I want to see this team bounce back. I want to see the city happy. I want to see these fans happy, because it's been stale and lethargic for 3 years now. And I think everyone's kind of over that at this point.
And our job is a lot more fun when the Saints are winning. I'll tell you what, because you're going to travel with the team. You're going to be at every game regardless. So if you're going to be there, it'd be fun if it was live and if the games had meaning.
Always the case. Always much more fun when the team you're covering is winning. All right, I think that'll do it for us here this week, unless you got anything else to add.
Nope, I'm good.
All right, he's good. He's about to go enjoy his weekend. I have one more day of work on Friday, and I will enjoy mine. NBA Finals tonight. Real quick, you got a prediction?
I think the Celtics win game 1, but I'm rolling with the Mavericks in 7 for
Me
the
too.
series.
I'm going Mavericks in 7. I said it on TV on Fox 8 Overtime a couple nights ago. So I'm sticking with that. So, all right, for Andre Johnson Jr., I am Sean Fazende. We'll catch you guys next time on Overtime.